Well, marketing is all about audience intent, authenticity, right? Knowing where a word comes from and why it means what it does can infuse any kind of copy with more intent, with greater authenticity, greater precision, and it enables you to wield those words more intentionally.
This is the Snarketing Podcast, for marketers, by marketers, talking to marketers with just a touch of snark. Now, here are your hosts, Valerie Vespa and Matt Wurst.
Well, whether it was an accident or deliberate, you are here listening to another episode of the Snarketing Podcast. We hope it was deliberate. Maybe it's all the attention we're getting thanks to the incredible guests and the snarky conversation. Either way, we're glad you're here. I'm Matt Wurst.
And I'm Valerie Vespa.
And we are ready to kick off this episode. And it's going to be a slightly different episode than you may have been either expecting.
You have a girl crush on the speaker, and we should talk about that.
I wouldn't call it a girl. I would call it a word crush. In that this guest today is not only
I actually think it's a nerd crush.
It might be a nerd crush. She's obviously very smart. She works in this industry and has for a long time. I met her at Adweek events. It was part of what she's been doing from a corporate comms perspective. But she's also an accomplished and published author. Now, authors use words in their books. That kind of is the point of a book, unless you're a children's illustrator. But she wrote a book about words. You read it. What did you think, Valerie?
I loved the way she set it up because I couldn't read it front to back, but I was reading parts of it like in different chapters, and it's very easy to do so with that particular book. And it ties in very funny comedy with history, and I like that. I like that a lot about it.
Well, let's meet Jess Zafarris. We've got a lot to talk about. Let's just jump in.
On this episode of the Snarketing Podcast, Val and Matt are talking with Jess Zafarris, who in addition to being the Director of Content at Ragan Communications and PR Daily, is also the author of several books about etymology. Her newest book is great. And as a lover of words, I cannot recommend it enough to anyone who is curious about, well, anything. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Matt, the mic is all yours.
Hi, Jess. Welcome to the Snarketing Podcast. It is an honor to have you here with us.
So excited to be here. This is excellent.
I think that you are going to raise the intellectual quality and quantity score of our podcast. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, considering most of our listeners. So I may ask you to dumb things down for certainly Valerie and me.
Definitely me.
Is that okay? Can we do that?
Oh, I'm so excited. I mean, my whole shtick is making etymology accessible and, also doing marketing stuff on the side.
First, I want to congratulate you because you have published, I guess not super new, although relatively new, a wonderful book that both Valerie and I actually read called, I have it right here, it's called Words from Hell, right? So we're talking about etymology, not entomology. So if anyone tuned in thinking we're going to be talking about bugs, I don't know, Jess, is that a mistake that some people make? They think you're...
It is. There's a joke that someone on the internet without fail tells me every single week, if not more than once a week. And it's people who confuse etymology and entomology bug me in ways I can't put into words.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Good. It was bad. I'm like, haha, I've heard that 10,000 times, but it is a good joke, so I don't mind. And I appreciate that they want to tell it to me. But yeah, entomology refers to the study of insects, and the root of that word means like segments of an insect's body. The word insect also refers to the segments of their bodies. And then etymology, the root of that one means the truest sense of a word.
See, we're already learning more. So this is, I feel like this is going to be great. And what's interesting is this book was written at a time where I feel like as a society, we are becoming less literate. I don't know, arguably dumber. and you wrote a book about words. So let's start with the why, right? What inspired you to even want to explore the twisted origins of everyday words?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have been writing about etymology for like 15 years now. I started a blog called Useless Etymology back in the day. I studied the development of English through literature in undergrad. Like Beowulf is Old English, Chaucer is Middle English, Shakespeare is Early Modern English, and so on and so forth. I started writing about this, trying to make it fun and accessible because, you know, your average etymology dictionary just isn't that fun. But the information in it is, you just have to tell it in a way that people find exciting. And everybody loves words. And it's also like, it's the best thing to study if you want to be a generalist in terms of like your learning and curiosity journey, because by studying words, you can study basically anything. You want to learn more about math, look at math words. If you want to learn more about astronomy, look at astronomy focused words. So it's great. You can learn about anything by looking at the words we use to describe them. As for Words from Hell, up until the moment it was published on Halloween of last year, I was a children's book author. My first book was called Once Upon a Word, and it was full of words for children. I found that I couldn't include a lot of words in that book, though, because a surprising number of words have nefarious and frightening and violent and racist and sexist and ableist origins, or, you know, they're just like swear words and stuff. So I started pulling outtakes, and I was like, man, there's enough here for a book. So I was on a podcast talking about Middle English, as you are often, and the producer of that podcast happened to be the acquisitions editor for Chambers Dictionaries, which is like the oldest publisher of etymology dictionaries in existence aside from like Oxford. And so they,
by the way, are there new ones published regularly? Because I feel like things don't change that often.
You would think that, but I mean, you know, think about how many words we introduce every year. I mean, just this year alone, we've got like, well, I guess that was like last year and the year before, but like Riz and whatnot. It comes up. So yeah, etymology dictionaries get updated all the time. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, she was like, do you want to write another book? And I was like, here's this proposal I came up with. And she was like, yes, that one. So it's good.
So like, where did your studies start? Like, were you reading dictionaries before, or, you know, and then also, you know, how has this Future Forward sort of helped you in your career in marketing?
So I had this teacher in 6th grade, a French teacher, total like dynamo of a human. I don't know that she actually taught me that much French, but she did teach me a lot of life lessons. And one of them was like, we came to class, we were supposed to have read Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince. I speak a little French, a little French. But we were supposed to have read like a chapter of this, and we were going through the reading, saying what it meant in English as we went through, and we came across a word that nobody knew. It wasn't on the vocab sheet, and none of us had bothered to look it up. And she like waited, and there was this big awkward silence where she like waited for someone to know what it meant, and then she like exploded at us and was like, how could you possibly read this and not want to know what it means? Like, how could you be so incurious that you would purposely remain ignorant of the meaning of a word? And maybe it like trauma burned like a curiosity into my brain. But I feel like that was one of the formative moments that led to me wanting to dig deeper and look farther into every word. Mm-hmm.
So as far as then, like, look, we're a snarky marketing podcast, right? And so much of marketing is about words, their meaning, their intent, their impact, right? Understanding what we create and how that sort of drives different types of behaviors. Did your interest in language fuel your interest in marketing, or did marketing kind of reinvigorate your interest in language, or have they always been the two pillars on which you've grown to become a mighty on the pedestal of brilliance here?
It's one and the same. My core like talent is really in journalism. I'm a content director at Ragan and PR Daily. I've been a content and audience director at Adweek, Writer's Digest, several other media orgs. I've run social for a lot of these media orgs. And a lot of people say that like my role is half marketing, half journalism. and I prefer to think of it as like pushing to think that the act of journalistic creation isn't just like putting out an article or a video that exists as a static object once it's published, but a living, breathing discussion starter and creative jumping off point that can be applied across stages. It remains alive and dynamic as long as it's accessible in our imagination. And I think the same is true for marketing and ad campaigns.
So a little bit about Ragan Communication and PR Daily. It's a focused trade publication for marketing and communication. So tell us a little bit about, like, dig in a little bit about your day job and how maybe your background in etymology, I almost said entomology, how that impacts what you do on a day to day.
So I'm the content director. Like I said, I manage a team of 8 people, give or take, maybe 6, with varying degrees of involvement. One of them is like we've got our social pro has a dotted line to me because I also ran like the social channels at Adweek, for example. The 2 editors in chief report to me. I work very closely with the events director to bring that information to stages. And I would say I also write our like words of the year columns, and we have a lot of like writing is very critical to writing, copywriting. You might even call it like spin, framing, authenticity, all come down to the words you use and the way you communicate with people. So I think we infuse so much meaning in so few words when we craft a piece of journalism, a piece of marketing copy, or a communication, either like internally or externally. But that word choice is going to be dissected, examined, pulled apart, and put back together by your audience. So it's a marriage of intent, meaning, and interpretation.
As we kind of bounce back and forth a little bit, and this is, I guess, what you think about in your brain every day, your professional life, your personal interests, and the fact that they intersect, that may or may not be the way we meander in this conversation. But going back to the book for just a second, I can't help but think about like your colleagues who are going to read this. And in the first 10 pages of the book, you are not holding back, right? You go deep. There's like bitch, shit, ass, fuck, first 10 pages and words. I don't hold back, and I'm not yet. Maybe in like 15 minutes into this episode, I'll be more comfortable using certain words. But are there, I guess my thinking as far as like being involved in and interacting with your colleagues day to day, are there words that you came across that you were surprised that people are using every day that they shouldn't, or they probably don't even know what the original meaning was, or words that you are not ever going to use around them regardless?
So they're used to me swearing, and I think most swear words, aside from like slurs, essentially are fair game, and the more we use them, the more we can defang them and untangle some of the power dynamics that have created a taboo around them. But there are words that like I attempt to avoid now that I know a little bit more about where they came from. The biggest one I would say is the terms like highbrow and lowbrow for comedy. Those words have their roots in phrenology, which was basically the like feeling the lumps and sizes on people's skulls to justify scientific racism, essentially. Someone with a highbrow, especially like a European-looking highbrow, was said to be more sophisticated, and someone with a lowbrow that is like a more pronounced supraorbital ridge, like you might find in people from certain races or ethnic backgrounds, were said to be like less intelligent or sophisticated. So those terms have some pretty brutal and problematic history behind them. Another one, like this one, is probably a little softer now, and not a lot of people would find it that offensive, but I'm trying to take the embedded ableism out of my language. Like the word, we don't really think about the word lame as being a term for someone with like a physical disability, but someone I know who has a disability sees it that way. And so I'm attempting to like not say that as often, even though in the past I considered that to be a relatively minor, like, oh, that's lame, you know?
Yeah. I love that the book combines like scholarly research and like smart people stuff with humor. But how do you balance the sort of academic rigor with the need to keep the content engaging and accessible? Because you had mentioned you were like trying to not dumb it down, but you're trying to make it, accessible to all. So can you share sort of how, who the intended audience is and how you kind of work to combine those two really well?
So I've learned a lot in the process of building up my TikTok channel, which has about 100,000 followers. They listen to me yammer about word origins, and I built that channel by responding to what they want to know. So you can like duet, stitch, reply to people who want, ask you questions about various things. People will tag me into videos to talk about discussions, and I've learned from the way that people absorb information on TikTok what makes for like a quick bite. The nice thing about this book, I think, is that you don't have to read the whole thing. You can open it up to any page and find a quick piece of interesting information to take away with you. You can consume the whole thing and learn maybe a more thorough narrative arc, but I adapted a lot of what I had applied when translating my research onto TikTok to the book as well, so that people could enjoy it in an otherwise complicated attention economy.
So what is your handle, just for a plug here, so people can?
It's my name, Jess Zafarris, Zafarris.
Great.
And then I also have a blog called Useless Etymology, where if you prefer to read quick bites, then you can also check them out there.
And what was one of your like highest, rated video that you had on TikTok?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let's see. I found, anything with swear words. For a little while, there are some recurring myths around swear words that go around on the internet periodically. One of them is that shit and fuck are acronyms, which they're not. They're like, those words existed in Old English before acronyms were a thing, and they were spelled completely differently. Some of the words that supposedly made them up are part of them did not exist at that time. Like fuck is sometimes said to be short for fornication under consent of the king, or for unlawful carnal knowledge, which like the word knowledge and the word king were both spelled with C's when the word fuck first existed.
It's very modern.
Sometimes
language is modernized, so clearly that doesn't
exactly.
hold up.
And then shit is said to be short for ship high in transit, apparently because shit was stamped on boxes of manure that were, they said, put on a higher deck of a ship so they wouldn't get wet or explode or something. I don't know the full story, but it's nonsense.
I mean, you don't want exploding shit on a ship regardless.
Right.
So I think, like, how important is origin and the past when planning, whether you're a marketer quarterly or annually or whatever, but creatively, right? Like, does it matter if we're still just trying to drive bottom line results for our clients and brands, et cetera?
Well, marketing is all about audience intent, authenticity, right? And knowing where a word comes from and why it means what it does can infuse any kind of copy with more intent, with greater authenticity, greater precision, and it enables you to wield those words more intentionally.
So I always love the idea of like taking the user generated content or the content that you get from TikTok, like, your fans responding to you. Like, how do you, like, what has been some sort of the most memorable feedback you've gotten either on TikTok or, from your book thus far?
Feedback on TikTok, I have this wonderful audience. I'd say I prefer TikTok over Instagram because I find the audience to be more curious and more interested in my content. And they operate in better faith in the comments. They're not as likely to like spew random falsehoods or just general hate. I mean, I do get haters every now and then, and I just block, delete, move on. But for the most part, I'd say the curiosity is lovely. And I'd say the most helpful feedback that you can apply across social media marketing, things like that, is reply, trust your audience, and then help people feel invested in your brand. So like if my brand is funny and weird and interesting etymology facts and dark and nefarious ones, then allowing them to help shape the way I develop content creates not only better content, but a relationship with those people and immediate audience insights into where I should be taking my platform.
Your social media professional focus is actually really interesting if you think about this convergence of expertise and knowledge that you have, because I think about the evolution of language, and there's so many things that obviously have changed that we've talked about, right? But now with TikTok and Twitter /X/ whatever platform du jour we're talking about, connections happen faster, communication happens faster, and how soon, you look at the time lapse between old, middle, and sort of evolved current modern English. How soon before our current language today is like totally unrecognizable in the future because of the riz that's blowing up on social media?
Well, not to give you more reading to do, but there's this fantastic book called Because Internet by Gretchen McCulloch, who's like a like scientific practical linguist. And she, in that book, examines the like the grammar and structure of online speech, which is different. Like it has rules, just like any dialect does, just like AP style
Sure.
has rules.
Manuals and handbooks are replaced by character counts.
Right. Yeah, and like, that you can create emphasis or de-emphasize or communicate humor through the way that you type a tweet or a Threads post. You can, if you go like all lowercase, typically it's observed as being more snarky or more irreverent, or it can convey flatness. All caps obviously looks like anger. There are like 700 different ways to make sarcasm appear in text, and there's no people have been trying to do this for centuries. There are a bunch of like obsolete punctuation marks that were intended to be sarcasm points. There was like the percontation point. There were a few other ones throughout history.
We need a new logo, Valerie. We got to figure out what the sarcasm. Like? Yeah, what is that? Wow.
But yeah, for the same reason, like we communicate in so many different ways. Other sarcastic ways of communicating are like you can put tildes around something, like isn't that special? And then you can use like carets like you would in HTML. You can if you have the ability to italicize, you can say you're so clever, or you can put things in quotes like you're a so-called word nerd. So there's
obviously
so many good ways.
You work in communications professionally. Which I think is important because I want people like you leading the way that people like us should be communicating. But have you ever thought about like creative as a progression or evolution from a marketing and like just within this ecosystem and industry? Do you want to be in the room when copywriters and creative directors are coming up with concepts?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's all storytelling. I focus on like journalism now, but I also write landing page copy and marketing copy and social copy for events and for certificate courses, and that, especially in journalistic environments, intent and context are so important. Like how you're reporting on DE&I, or how you're addressing, say, the student protests that are happening right now is critical, and marketers need to be equally aware of that kind of thing, or else they'll end up like running into a terrible PR wall, or igniting the ire of the internet.
So Matt was talking about how luxury, like the word luxury centuries ago, was looked at as a negative connotation. And, now obviously has that, done a 180 in terms of meaning premium and desirable, etc. Are there any other interesting words that you can speak of that have kind of had a 180, switch over time, that mean something very different from what they were originally derived to mean?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah. So just for context for our audience, luxury is now associated with high-priced products and lavish experiences. But it originally meant, and it definitely meant that before, but it was associated more with, there was a little guilt to it. There was a lot more, the church doesn't really want you to want luxury. You should be happier with your lot in life. So it also, the root of that word means to dislocate. It means basically extending yourself too far into gluttony and luxury.
Well, what's interesting is when you talk about it in your book, it's actually in the chapter associated with bias and bigotry. So right? If people knew that luxury is like 3 pages away from the N-word in your book, I don't know that it would still be as
Right. It's excess and extravagance, but like in a frowny, judgy way, implying debauchery, dissolute behavior, sexuality, and like carnal sin.
take that, jewelry designers.
But we run into a lot of that. There were much judgier connotations when it came down to the way we enjoyed things, especially our bodies. Like a lot of words for women's parts have a lot of judgment embedded in them. The way male parts were described was also very different because women were more their sexuality was something that the church definitely didn't
the
want
patriarchy,
us to think about.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. The word climax, it's also a term for like it's both the storytelling sense of a climax, the most important part, and then also the thing that you feel that is the highest point of your orgasm if you're having sex. And it literally means ladder. And then in rhetoric, it refers to like clauses that rise to a peak through the repetition of keywords. And it's interesting that context can still steer what that means.
Yeah, we talk in marketing a lot about
another.
Storytelling, but you don't hear the word climax used very often in a campaign anymore.
Which is interesting because a lot of campaigns do use climaxes in the rhetorical sense, especially. Think about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. It rises to a climax because he repeats words that become increasingly they build to that big moment.
A lot of the words that you talk about in your book and that we use every day can have multiple meanings, some positive, some negative, and the context matters as well. One of my favorite words to use is fuck, obviously. Mm-hmm. But 99% of the time, I am not using it in a way that aligns with like the primary meaning. But you talk about how we fucked up the meaning of the word fuck. Can it be Can it be unfucked at this point? Or has the fuck horse left the barn?
I would advocate for not unfucking the word fuck because I really like that swear words and profanities have become just a general emphatic term at this point. Shit and fuck and a number of others can mean basically anything. And I like them that way because that way we don't censor ourselves as much.
But then why is that a word? Like, aren't there other words that can better be used in terms of...
I mean, better. That's a question. One of the reasons we use it is because it comes with that taboo embedded into it. And the reason for that is power dynamics of actually between the Normans and the Anglo-Saxons. So back in 1066, the Normans invaded Britain and they brought with them French, basically. About 60% of our modern English words are Latin derived via French. And only about 25% are derived from the Germanic Old English language, even though it is still a Germanic language structurally speaking. And the reason we have 60% Latin and French-derived words is because of the Normans. They came in, they established a ruling class, they became the powers that be. So where Anglo-Saxon words became seen as simpler, more vulgar, more basic. You see it a lot in the words for food that we use. So a chicken is a Germanic-derived word, and when it's on the plate, it becomes poultry, which is French-derived. Cow is an Old English Germanic-derived word, and when it's on the plate, it becomes the French-derived beef. Yeah. Same for pig and pork. Same for also another one, not food-related, but house and mansion. The word mansion is just derived from the French word for house, maison. But we think of a French-derived mansion as being much bigger than an Old English-derived house. Sorry. Back to fuck, though. Words such as fornication and for shit like defecation, these are all Latin and French-derived words. The Old English-derived words were more or less just the word for that thing, though fuck has always been a little bit naughty because of what it describes. But like shit was just the word for defecating until the French came in and were like, no, this one's fancier. Your word is rude.
Mm-hmm. Are you going back to like new words every year? Where do you feel like those are populating from? Is it like certain cultures, like as of late? Is it like younger gens? Is it, what, and historically, like, I guess, has that changed and evolved over time, like where new words develop?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the internet culture. But I also think we'll see a lot more fusion of languages over the next few years. I can anticipate a lot of like Spanish influenced words entering English. There are already full, complete new dialects in like Miami and stuff. And as as we continue to like globalize our online communities, I think that we'll learn more from each other on that front, whether or not we actually fully learn to be fluent in other languages.
I hate to bring up the topic that is kind of changing everything else, but the way that artificial intelligence is ingesting language and spitting out language, clearly this is a topic that can't be avoided when it comes to the use of and meaning of words. But I was reading, I can't remember where, we'll have to insert reference here, editor, but something around the fact that like 90%, if not more, of inputs right now for large language models are English and very like properly written English. Does that risk or potentially incentivize different groups for how they communicate, or will it change and accelerate the ways that certain things pick up or don't?
I would say I have a couple of thoughts on AI. As a journalist, the output that my team and I create on our sites is never AI generated when we're writing a story, for example. However, we do occasionally use it for like, with full disclosure, for simple write-ups, or like if you want to use it for ideation or topical generation. Say I need 5 ideas for sessions on crisis comms or something like that, then it can be useful for that. I have told my teams that if I can tell that it's AI, then they have to rewrite it completely, because it is kind of obvious. Like I would contest the idea that proper writing goes into large language models more that tired marketing copy goes into large language models, because it spits out what author Chuck Wendig calls art barf. It like smashes up all of the copy that it has access to. And like, think about your average writer. They're not like, your average writer is below average in terms of like the quality of content that you can develop. And more than half of that is just crap content. And it's all being eaten, chewed up, and spat out in like the most cliche ways possible. If it learns how to be creative, maybe that could be interesting, but I think that would require better input and more curated input. What I'm excited for in the AI space, though, is that we are getting a little bit away from the idea of efficiency, and more toward the idea of innovation. So what are the most creative ways you can prompt a robot are becoming more part of the conversation than like, how many people can we eliminate by by using AI as a replacement, because we've realized by now that the copy that it spits out is crap. Like, it's so bad.
So this book is really beautiful, and I implore the audience to go out and get a copy.
Have you found the hidden objects on the cover?
I saw there was a shark. Yeah, like certain topics. Meanwhile, shark, I already referenced something that you taught me in the book,
cool.
Right? Mm-hmm. The idea of a shark was actually first a word used to describe a human, and then was later defined or described to an animal. That's right. That shook me.
You know what? Another one of those that always blows people's mind is the word escalate didn't exist until after the invention of the escalator, which is always surprising, because we use escalate in terms of like escalating tensions and things like that, which you would think would be a much older concept, and it is an older concept, but we didn't use the word escalate for it. Wow. It's named after the escalator.
Wow.
Which is like was like an invention by like Bob Escalator, who was building moving staircase for Macy's. What was the origin of escalator then?
Basically, yeah, it's influenced by an older word, interestingly also a brand name, but it wasn't originally a brand name. The word Escalade with a D is older than the word escalator, it dates back to like the 15th century, and it meant to climb something with a ladder. So that certainly influenced the word escalate, but that wasn't coined until I think Seeberger was the one who introduced it at the World's Fair, but it may have been somebody earlier.
I feel like you could write an entire book about brand and product names and the origins of those. One of the words you talk about in the book that I think about as like this paradigm of brilliance from creative and marketing is mayhem, right? It's a word that was initially associated with intentional violence. That kind of shocked me to learn that. And now it's become this commonplace term. Yes, Allstate uses it, 3 times in, a commercial segment in sporting events.
I do really enjoy, I think we could probably have a little more fun with the term like sabotage. It's a little bit of a pun. It has associations with like, with unionization and labor rights of the early, I want to say, I don't know, 1800s.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, was it
something
like
like
Guy
that.
Fawkes or
Could
something
be.
around there historically?
Oh, I mean, good question. I mean, the reason we use the word guy is because of Guy Fawkes. It was not a word for like a generic dude until he became the kind of paradigm for that word. Jack was the word we used instead of guy before that.
Huh.
But yeah, now that we're on that, sabotage means like throwing a shoe in something. Though it was like you would throw your wooden shoe into the machine. It became like a symbol of protest for beleaguered workers. So I think that could be interesting.
Yeah, I think a shoe company or an organized labor union could in some way bring that back.
I feel like Matt needs your cell phone so he can text you occasionally when he has thoughts on.
That's fine with me. That sounds like a good content generation idea too.
Well, that's what I was saying. Jess should be in every creative brainstorm everywhere from now on. I don't know if that scales, but that would be a good service that you could provide, like paid, like a freelance mercenary, which is also another term that probably has lost its meaning over time, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Instead of Chat GPT, it's Chat Jess.
Yeah.
It's just
Chat Jess Pete.
So let's now fast forward from Old English to Middle English to Adweek and agencies, because it's basically the natural evolution, right? You talked about working at Dentsu, which is my alma mater, right? How do these experiences connect in your brain?
I'd say that it's a two-way street. And I've always tried to make it a two-way street too. Like when I launched Adweek's TikTok channel, I launched mine around the same time, and I tried to make sure that Adweek's stayed ahead of mine just a little bit the whole time, so that, I was giving it most of my energy and most of the benefit, but I was learning from both. I would attempt things or test out features on my channel and then apply them in Adweek's TikTok channel. And that one, I think I got it to like 120,000 or some odd followers. And it was a lot of fun. And I got to learn about 2 different audiences on TikTok too. Like I did a series, I think it was called like Weird News Weekly or something, but it was about the strange brand activations that had happened that week, or like the weird product drops and things like that, because there were always like 10 per week. And I found that the audience for that was a little bit different than the audience for my my word origins. It was a little less intellectual, more interested in like pop culture and more interested in like whatever Oreo is doing.
So one more plug. You are on session 4 or episode 4 rather of your podcast about entomology called Words Unraveled.
That's right.
Valerie, she's a competitor now in this space. We can't have you can't be promoting another podcast on this podcast, can we?
I know, and she's gotten monetization before we have, so shame on us. We're doing something wrong.
We're not doing it for the money, all right? No. Tell us, what's your vision for the podcast? What's called Words Unraveled, right?
That's right, and it's spelled with 2 L's because I think it looks better, and my co-host is British, so he spells it that way. He's lovely. His name is Rob Watts. He runs the popular YouTube channel Rob Words. He is a delight, and I love working with him on that podcast because we had made videos and content about many of the same words over the years. So when we pick a topic, we don't necessarily prepare a ton of research. We come with what we already know, and we know different things about it, and we bring together this like Venn diagram of knowledge. I have more perspective on like Americanisms and dialects, and he has more perspective on, he speaks like 6 languages. So like sometimes I'm like, God, he's brilliant. But he brings more of like the British perspective, and then also folds in other languages into what we're talking about. So it's a lot of fun. I think I focus a little more on, well, I don't know about this. I'm going to say this, but I'm not sure how true it is. I like to dig into like the humorous, like funny side of the storytelling. And then he makes a lot of connections, I think, to other languages. So it's fun.
Nice.
Must be really compelling to have a really smart co-host. Valerie's jealous. So we're going to move to the lightning round, Jess, but I feel like you have already brought the thunder and the lightning with the amount of information you have delivered to us. I am going to need to go like shower off afterwards because I'm sweating so profusely. Just looking up half the things you've said.
I'm still stuck on content mercenary. I want to keep that one. Like, that's good because the word itself means like somebody who like works with like, it implies mercantile. Like you've given yourself as like someone like a consultant from back in the day.
Okay, first question. I love a good portmanteau. We've talked about this. What is your favorite portmanteau in the English language?
Can I also talk about my name, which is a portmanteau?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
So my last name is Zafarris. My unmarried name was Farris, Ferris, and my husband's, who is Greek, his was Zaferis. It's more or less means sapphire. So our names were Ferris and Zafarris. So we smashed them together and made my spelling of Zafarris Zafarris, which is fun. Because otherwise I would be like Zafarris Ferris or Ferris Zafarris, and that's just too much. Now I am the only Jess Zafarris in the world.
Okay, well, you are unique. The best portmanteau in the English language is snarketing, just so you know.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I also, it reminds me, that one in particular reminds me of some of Lewis Carroll's, and he's, the author of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and he coined the word portmanteau to describe the words that he used to write Jabberwocky, the poem. So it's a nonsense poem, but you can tell what it means because all of the words are like combinations of pre-existing words. Like he had slithy is lithe and slimy, frumious is fuming and furious. But there are words that like you don't realize are portmanteaus. Like the word electrocute is a morbid combination of electric and execute. Then there are like some from history, like gerrymander is a blend of the name Elbridge Gerry and salamander. Elbridge Gerry was created in like in the 1800s, a convoluted map for his voting district. And now
a Bostonian, by the way, Valerie, in case you were curious.
Very nice, of course.
Yeah.
Indeed. And then we have like, obviously podcast is also a portmanteau of, interestingly, iPod and broadcast from back in the day.
Well, my key takeaway from that is you compared us to Lewis Carroll, so I appreciate that. In our industry, it's become a trend for people to talk about superpowers. If creativity were a superpower, what would your costume look like?
I feel like it would just be covered in letters, like letters everywhere. Maybe it would be like a Rorschach mask, but like made of like typography.
Was that, I remember Batman, the Riddler, he had like the question marks?
Oh yeah, so similar.
So instead it's just like words, letters, etc. Okay. If you could create a new word to define the next phase of where we go in marketing or the changes that are happening in our industry and what we're going through, what would you name it?
I'm still stuck on the marketing mercenary. Actually, I'm not. I will come around if I think of a way to coin that in a new way. But they say this year is going to be the year of like the fractional marketing leader, and I think that's probably true. I've already seen a lot of very cool people do it. Christina Garnett is one in particular who's absolutely rocking the fractional game. I think maybe our word could be something along the lines of like a portmanteau of fractional and mercenary or something. Fractionary. I don't know.
Farketing. I don't know.
I love it. It's perfect.
Yeah. We are from snarketing to farketing. As someone whose interests and humor has fascinated me since we first met, what is the last show you've been.
Fallout. It's so good.
So based on the game, for those who have not watched it,
which
it
Fallout
is
4
Netflix.
and New Vegas are just such good games. And the new show is also excellent. The ending was a little rough, but like the rest of it was just and the world building, excellent.
Well, so just to take one spin on that, for those who don't know or haven't watched it, Fallout is basically the idea that people will that in the 50s there was a nuclear war. Some people survived by going into a bunker and emerged 200 years later, and there were some people who survived on the surface. Yet they all still speak the exact same language, and the words and definitions and meanings and intents didn't change at all. How realistic would that be?
Neither did any of the marketing. It's a great show for marketers too, because like there are brands everywhere. There's great design. There are like gags about advertising. The whole tone of the show and the game also pulls in these fictional organizations that were popular at the time.
So last question. You said your first book was a children's book. Mm-hmm. Your second book is a
decidedly not
dark yet fascinating look at words from hell. So are you already thinking about a third book? And if so, where are you headed this time?
Yeah, it's almost done. It's called Useless Etymology. It's also going to be a card game. I'm excited about that. It may or may not be called Useless Etymology when it gets down to it. The book probably will be, though. It's based on my blog, and it's like a meandering look through all of my favorite things about etymology. So it has like a chapter on portmanteaus. It has a chapter on unexpectedly Shakespearean words like unfriend and swagger, which were both Shakespearean terms. It has words on an exploration of proprietary eponyms. So like the words bubble wrap and ping pong were originally brand names, but now we use them generally. It also talks about like the way that the fedora, the piece of fashion, was first popularized as a women's fashion item by actress Sarah Bernhardt. So it digs into many things, illogic, logic, nonsense, and fun. So highly recommend.
Well, I cannot wait to get that one. But first, for anyone listening who has not yet read book 2, I think you should hasten your descent into a hellscape of entertainment, humor, and intellect.
We call
you
that
can
the
use that, by
underword.
the way, if you'd like, as a on the jacket of the paperback. But Jess Zafarris, thank you for joining us.
Sounds like a spell.
Podcast.
Well, that certainly was something. I think the language center of my artificially intelligent brain just blew an NVIDIA chip. I'm certainly going to have a lot to think about, and we couldn't be more grateful to Jess for her time and shared wisdom. From marketing insights dating back to the 15th century, or all the meanings for the word fuck, that was as meaty of an episode as it gets. Until next time, I'm Al, wishing you all a snarky day.